going. I appreciate everyone making the time to join. I know it's hard giving up a Saturday in our weird COVID world where we're bouncing between work all day long, family obligations, kids, the house, and making it to the grocery store. But certainly appreciate everyone joining me today. I'm Joey Jablonski. I'm a VP of product at Manifold. We're a product-focused AI company based out of Oakland. Also have an office up in Boston, and then I'm the lone wolf here in Texas. Today I'm going to talk about building a product mindset in IT. So I'm going to talk about kind of traditional technology organizations, the type of IT organizations that you'll find in Fortune 500s and other companies that technology is not necessarily the core of what they do, but it's the core of enabling what they do provide. Speaks to my background. I've spent time in these types of organizations and have some learnings and friction points that I've run into that I wanted to share with the organization. So first, I want to throw a thanks out to our sponsors. Being able to go to these types of events, to hone our own skills, to talk to other practitioners, I find extraordinarily valuable. And these sponsors are just wonderful, being able to enable us to do it without the registration fees you find at a lot of other conferences. And I, like everyone else, am personally excited about hopefully soon we'll be doing these back face-to-face and in person. Maybe we'll just put fewer people at the chairs and the tables, but get there. A little more about me. As I mentioned, work for Manifold today. Been in a variety of organizations over the years where I've been in both kind of traditional Fortune 500s where technology's, the enabler for the organization. And then I've been with companies where, our product is very digital centric, very digital native. The important part about this is that I've held both product roles where I've focused on what do we need to build, who are the personas, how do we bring it to market? And then I've had the engineering side of the house where, the teams that are building these sorts of capabilities. And a lot of my experiences come from being in both those worlds. I've seen the friction that comes from when product and engineering don't have a trust and a relationship built up. I've seen what happens when product is not empowered in the organization to break down barriers, to experiment, to try new things. And I've seen what happens in an organization where you don't have a product team, where somebody gets bestowed as the quote unquote product owner, and you struggle to deliver as a result of not having that passion, that excitement, that enablement, driving the team, driving the organization. So I encourage everyone, join our Slack channel. I'm in full screen mode, so I'm not really gonna be able to watch too closely, but I'll definitely jump to Slack before the end of our half hour and answer any questions that come up. I'll also pause between slides for a few seconds. So if there's something that folks want to ask and talk about, live, definitely feel free to jump in. More than happy to take this in a different direction if there's questions or things that folks want to chat about. So one of the things I found over the years is that technology organizations, they describe themselves as agile. When you ask an organization, what's your culture? How do you work? Like agile comes up a lot. The struggle with that is that a lot of organizations have varying definitions of what agile is. And in a lot of cases, the organizations treat agile as a replacement for a strong product organization. They tend to talk about, well, we have a product owner, it's a very agile hat that you wear, and say that substitutes, that is the representation of product. This is not true in any way, shape, or form, and leads to a lot of the structural challenges in organizations. So all the organizations I work with, I really like to push this idea that product's what we build, it's why we do it. Agile is how we do it. Agile is the execution methodology for how we build. You have to have strong organizational principles in both those areas to be successful. One cannot replace the other. The other piece that I find in technology organizations a lot is that we sometimes forget who pays the bills. I've been in a lot of organizations where the purity of the technology solution takes precedent over all other things within the environment, all other decision-making processes. Kind of the tail wags the dog. We talk about we have to automate our IT, we have to modernize our applications. And because of that absence of the product mindset, we tend to forget why we're doing it. We tend to forget to talk to our business partners about what do they need to be successful. So how do we drive change? How do we as product folks kind of turn this conversation around with our respective technology organizations, with the IT teams that we represent? Uh, First and foremost, we've got to speak the language of product. We have to embrace storyboards. We have to avoid backlogs. This language, while simple, means a lot in an organization. I find that backlogs tend to become this dumping ground of every random idea that someone has, every sort of feature, we'll just dump it in the backlog, and then we'll eventually prioritize it. Realistically, we're never going to prioritize it, and people struggle to make those connections. I personally, if I look at a backlog of 200 things, even if they're all good ideas, I'm not going to be able to effectively put it into a story that I can tell. So embracing this idea of storyboards, this idea of being able to passionately tell a story to our partners about what we're delivering, why we're delivering, and how it builds on one another. That enables us to prioritize on simplistic measures. If we're building a platform, we need to focus on adoption. How many connections are we driving? If we're building a data product, we need to focus, are people consuming that data product and how often? So by defining these simplistic measures that are associated with our storyboards, we're able to drive a different type of conversation about the work that's being prioritized, why we're doing the work that we are. And then finally, product manager, not product owner. I personally don't like the title product owner. I think it's an iteration on top of business relationship manager, business manager, these other titles that we've put in the IT organization over many years to kind of bridge that gap between it and our business partners. But this idea that we have a product manager, we have someone that truly represents what are we doing, why are we doing it, and is passionate about that, becomes critical. And it also becomes infectious. If we can do these things and build the habits within our IT engineering organizations, within our infrastructure teams, within our data teams, we'll change the behavior over time. We'll build new habits, we'll build new behaviors in the organization. Measuring platform adoption is the next big one. I find a lot of IT organizations tend to start with measures of completion. So I finished a story, I finished 5 stories, I finished an epic. They don't really focus on adoption. I find organizations that are successful, they focus on who's using what we build. Are more people using it? Are we seeing more calls to our API? Measuring that over time to really make sure that people are finding value in what we're producing. But also changing those metrics. As a platform, grows, as the number of data products we have available, grows in the organization, we also want to change those metrics. What behavior do we want to drive? Who's the new persona that we want to get onto our platform? So don't ever be afraid to change those metrics. The metrics you use as a day 1 team are very different from a day 100 team. And then evangelize, get everyone involved in the IT organization to act as a change agent. If everyone in the organization from top to bottom can't talk about who we're enabling in the business, what product we're selling, how we're selling more of it, how we're selling it to a new market, we've missed an opportunity there. Everyone should be an evangelist for what we're doing across it. And that really starts with the product manager. It starts with the product manager, like driving that passion and that love across the organization. Validate your ideas and approaches. This is something that I've found in a lot of IT organizations. Like they're scared to ask for help in a lot of cases. Like they tend to take the approach that our problem is unique or our technique for solving it is differentiated in one way or another. So I like to say that the painful thing, the problem that we're solving is probably not new. It's probably been solved somewhere else, albeit maybe differently for a different industry, a different regulatory regime. There's just different technology available today. So when you come in, validate the ideas and approaches against that. How do we solve our problem? But most important, how do we learn from others? Use your network, use your vendors, use other companies that are similar to you to help solve your problem, to help address, how do we get better at this? I spent a bunch of time with a life insurance company, and there was this belief that what they did was truly different and truly unique. And there were aspects of their business that were truly unique. How they did underwriting, how they went about measuring risk for what policies were underwritten was fundamentally unique with them. But other aspects of their business, things like dealing with HIPAA regulated healthcare data, dealing with financial information like people's bank holdings and things, not unique. Hundreds and hundreds of companies do this on the market. They do it well. So this organization, they focused a lot of their time on reinventing the wheel. How do we become HIPAA compliant? How do we protect patient privacy? And they didn't spend a lot of time talking to other organizations, leveraging their vendors to learn this. So they end up learning through failure a lot more often than they really needed to. They really could have leveraged that experience in a more effective way. So they didn't have those sorts of learning experiences. And then finally, use prototypes and experiment. It's shocking the number of organizations that I work with, that I've either worked with or consulted with over the years, that they're scared to use prototypes. They're scared of building something that may be throwaway. They truly believe that we know everything. If we spend a little more time up front, we'll understand our requirements better, and that we can be more effective at building it the first time and building it right. I find no greater value in large technology organizations than being able to take 2 or 3 engineers, carve them off for a couple of weeks at a time and say, we've got a couple ideas. Let's build something quickly. Let's get it in front of our personas, our customers, our buyers, our users, and let's just see what they say. If they cringe when we show it to them, if they complain when we show it to them, that's useful feedback. We know that that's not a successful path for us. It also allows us to build upon top of that very quickly. We can iterate very, very quickly and not have to go back to the drawing board. Over long periods of time, we can provide that incremental step for that. As a product owner, it's absolutely critical that you embrace teams that must, and I put quotes around, approve everything you do. If I was to look at one of the biggest reasons that corporate initiatives struggle, I wouldn't necessarily say fail, but they struggle, they get delayed, they get marred up in political process. It's because we don't embrace those teams, particularly security, particularly compliance. We build products without allowing those organizations to have a voice early and often. So the sooner that we as a product manager that's representing technology organizations can engage with compliance and talk about what things in our industry is coming down the line, what new laws like CPRA are going to be in scope for us, the better a chance we can do of enabling our engineering teams to make those habits rather than stories. And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations get marred up in the idea of non-functional requirements that get thrown in the backlog. And there's that word again. So people focus on completing the stories, and the engineers don't fully understand the scope and breadth of what they're trying to protect and defend. So building that cultural habit by taking what compliance and security want to do, enabling our engineering teams to understand it and internalize it so it becomes part of their working habits. That way, when we go back to talk to compliance and security, we're not talking about them handing us requirements. We're talking about us presenting what we're doing, why we feel it's going to meet our obligations, why we believe the principles are sound, and streamline those later reviews so we don't end up with inevitable delays. And then make sure the business is supportive. Anywhere we have to take risk, if we have to use HIPAA protected data in new ways, if we have to potentially use new services on our cloud providers, make sure that our business partners are aware of that risk and what it means, and that they're supportive of it. The last thing you want to be is a product manager that's standing up after a breach of a new platform or potentially compliance issues and going at it alone. The better you can lock arms with your business partners, your technology teams, the better we can get through those sorts of inevitable challenges. And then owning corporate barriers. Inevitably, as organizations get larger, you're going to have friction points that come in. You're going to have financial teams that introduce different trade-offs that we have to make. You're going to have strategic planning organizations that want visibility into where the organization is going. You're going to have other product teams that we have to lockstep our roadmap. It is up to the product manager to own those corporate barriers. These are things that simply cannot be delegated to others in the organization. They're not engineering's team responsibility. They're not up to the managers of the organization. These are really things that the product manager has to take ownership and accountability for, and make sure that the engineers know what they're building, to make sure that we protect them from churn at absolutely all costs. That individual that's owning the product hat is diligent about communication between the different teams. Other teams are aware of what we're building, why we're building it. What are those experiments that we went through that failed or were successful? And this over time will help us build trust. If we can deliver products in an incremental way, if we can get our adoption increased over time, we'll build trust with those teams that we know what we're doing, that we're becoming successful. And then finally, remediation of tech debt. This is one of those things that the engineering team is ultimately accountable for their platforms, their technology, but the product manager has to be aware of it, because it will become an impact on them. That if they don't partner with engineering to remediate tech debt over time, to go back and refactor code, to leverage new technologies as they come out, it will become a problem for the entire organization that we just have to manage. So it's up to the product manager to have a lens to that and never forget that that's something that we've got to be aware of. We've got to slowly chip at so it doesn't become an iceberg for us. So, where does product sit as it relates to the traditional kind of technology teams? So you've got your technology, you've got your design, you've got your business folks. Your business folks are the ones that they hold the checkbook, they hold the decisions, they own the outbound capabilities. Who are we selling to? What markets? Who are we partnering with? Product management is about making sure that we have streamlined communication between those organizations, to make sure that we are always pushing the envelope, pushing the organization to go faster than they've previously been comfortable with, through experimentation, through trying new technologies, but also there with a point of view on, what are we hearing from our customers? What are we hearing from our business partners? And helping break down those barriers. The most successful product managers that sit in IT organizations are the ones who make sure that InfoSec requirements are met up front and we don't have delays later on, to make sure that we don't have challenges down the road with additional organizations that need to be part of the conversation, and owning those corporate barriers. We've got the right funding, we're part of the corporate strategy, we're aligning with the needs of the business. So I appreciate everyone's time today. This has been a lot of fun so far. Let me shift the conversation. I'm gonna jump out of full screen, see if we have any questions in Slack. But if there's anything you want to talk about, why don't you come off mute and ask away?
Hey, Joey, this is Mike Gaither. Thanks for the talk. I really liked it. There's a lot of great advice here on ways to trend that really support you understanding product management or product role in an organization. And I'm wondering, it looks like a lot of this transcends even just an IT kind of organization. What is the security compliance element the big part that comes up for IT organizations, or are there other things that were particularly big elements for IT?
Yeah, I think there's three categories that come up, most often within IT that don't come up with other types of organizations you may be engaged with. The first and foremost is this shift to Agile. What methodology do you use? IT organizations tend to describe themselves as Agile more often than companies that make widgets, organizations that may be doing marketing, things like that. So the product manager really has to be conscious of the methodology that we define what we're building versus the methodology of how we build it, and making sure there's clear lines there and they don't get muddled. The second tends to be InfoSec, governance, compliance, kind of that intersection of protecting our data assets, protecting our customers' data assets. And that comes up a lot. Technology teams have traditionally dealt with that very late in the game. It's up to the product manager to pull those conversations up front so it doesn't become a friction point later in the engagement. And then the finance components. I'm noticing more and more technology organizations that are putting financial management, managing our cloud spend. Is this OpEx or CapEx? Are we using vendor resources versus in-house? And that's hard for engineering teams. Like that's just not a skill that they've been developing over many years. So the product management team pulling that away, so the engineering teams can do what they're good at. They're good at assessing technologies. They're good at putting those technologies together. They're good at operating them. They're good at building, highly reliable, highly resilient systems. Finance, not so much. Let those friction points fall somewhere else. Excellent. Anything else I can answer for folks? Anything folks are curious about?
Joe, you said something that spurred a question, then I forgot it. I'm very familiar with product. I've been in software for a long time, but I've just moved to a new role that is in IT, right? So now I'm dealing with, since I was software, I was kind of the business side now, and now I'm IT and dealing with ITIL and what that means.
Yep.
And so we still are, there are some teams that are starting to move Agile, but most of the apps that my team deals with will be vendor specific. We have a number of them. And so so I'm thinking, how can I use more Agile? And I like some of the things you said about, using product manager versus product owner, and some of the things basically we would use, not say full on, say Scrum or whatever, but do you have any more insight on that, especially when dealing with the vendors? Obviously it would depend on the vendor relationship, correct? And
you're hitting on an interesting point. Particularly technology organizations have to figure out who they are. Are they an engineering organization? That is, they build, they find solutions, they put capabilities together. Or are they an operating organization? They manage relationships with vendors, they manage integration points with vendors. And I find that most organizations don't pick which of those two identities they want to be. And it's got a lot of downstream impacts. The way that you build an operational model, whether it's SRE, whether it's DevOps, whether it's DevSecOps, in an engineering world, that is, we have our own code base, we're managing release cycles, we're managing A/B testing. That's very different than a world where you have a vendor that's doing that testing before they do release, before they bring new products to market. So first off is identifying which of those identities you want to associate with as an organization, building an operational model behind that. Like, what roles do we need? What sort of functions do we need within each of those? And then there becomes the influence perspective. As a product manager, you're always going to have new features that you need. How you go about getting them is going to be fundamentally different in those worlds. If you're building everything, well, you go sit down with the engineering team, you do a mock-up, they build it. Well, with a vendor, it may not be that easy. You may have to play we're not going to renew without it. We may need to bring in procurement to talk about how do we influence the roadmap of that vendor. And that's where it really becomes critical, because how you execute, how you advance capability, I would argue becomes much harder in a vendor-centric model, because you can't necessarily bend their arm. They're not quote unquote your engineering teams.
thanks, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions, anything, or any thoughts that people want to share from their own experiences? Well, excellent. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. We'll give folks a few more minutes to jump to their next section, refill their coffee cups, do the inevitable stretch between sessions. Certainly appreciate everyone's time today. Really happy everyone joined me. I'll post the slides on the channel for folks who made it, and feel free to share away. If you have additional follow-up questions, I sit on the Slack channel for ProductCamp Austin. Catch me there, or find me on LinkedIn. So thanks, everybody.